So I'm Rachel Poysky. I'm next gen pastor here at MDPC. Been here about 20 years, minus a few when I was not here. And this is my husband, James. He's a child neuropsychologist, owns this practice in Katy Child Psychology. And we have a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I'd love to just hear you all, your ages of your kids and things like that, so we can kind of cater our talk a little bit. So you want to go ahead, Jose? 10 and 12. Okay. Okay, great. 11 and 10. Okay. 8 and 4. Okay, perfect. All right, well, what our goal really here, social media technology is so big, but our goal is just kind of to talk a little bit about what do you need to watch out for in social media, what our experience has been working with families and kids, and then just some practical things about how to manage it. It's such a different experience in childhood now than what it was when we were kids. So we're all navigating it. It feels like we're in this new pioneer phase, but we just want to share a little bit about what we've experienced. So, James, you want to kind of say what we know about social media?
Or we think we know.
What we think we know.
Yeah, and what we suspect and what we think we know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of like Rachel said, even though it might look like we're the experts, like I'm realizing how much I don't know every day. So we can only speak to this kind of as parents as well. And there's, this is really, we can't say we're experts on social media, but there's some stuff that's out there. So one thing that I always want to remind parents, and some of these things are going to be obvious. Some of these things are probably going to be what you've already thought about before. There may not be anything earth-shattering. So sorry if some of the stuff I'm saying is Captain Obvious sorts of things, but I like to kind of go over everything just so that we're not skipping over things, because sometimes there's always aspects that we haven't thought of before. So one thing just to remind people is that online predators go where kids are, right? That's what they're attracted to, that's what they flock to. And they're very sophisticated in using those platforms to get to know kids. Every kid that I meet with all day long, they can tell you that you don't give out your personal information to online predators. That's not how predators work, though, right? What they do is they groom kids, which is they play games with them, they befriend them, and gradually over time, they introduce themselves more and more into kids' friendship circles. And at least once a week, when I'm talking with kids as part of like a new patient interview, when I'm talking with them, I'll ask them about their friends at school, and then I'll ask them about their friends online. And at least once a week, I'll have somebody tell me that they have 3 or 4 friends online that they have never met in person. And I'll ask them, well, tell me about your friend online. Well, so-and-so is an 8-year-old boy. He lives in Florida with his parents, and we play Minecraft together. And every time I ask them, well, how do you know he's 8? How do you know he lives with his parents in Florida? And they say, verbatim, because that's what he said, okay? So kids do a pretty good job about, when they see a person in real life, they're pretty good about oftentimes having kind of that spider sense warning of danger. They're terrible at doing it online. And predators know that. So, just because a kid is going to a kid website or a kid group or a kid kind of game collective doesn't mean that there aren't predators there as well, okay? And I've had parents tell me that, well, I did that when I was a kid. These are younger parents. I did that when I was a kid and I turned out okay. Don't fall into that logic trap, okay? So it's always a good idea. Well, we'll talk about kind of what to do about these things later on, but I just want to kind of make that clear to everybody. So the other thing to keep in mind is that any type of media influences beliefs, right? Back when radio first developed, that had a strong impact on people's beliefs, and it took them a while to adjust to that and to get better at determining, okay, what's true and what's not true. Same thing like in the 30s and 40s. When movies became mainstream, they were a heavy means of propaganda and influencing beliefs and decisions, and it took a while for people to adjust to that and to know how to kind of discriminate what's right and wrong. TV in the 50s and 60s, same thing. Like, I wasn't alive then, but from what I hear, when commercials would come on, people would gobble it up as like the gospel truth. And it took them a while to determine that, okay, well, maybe they're trying to manipulate me, maybe it's not 100% accurate. Right now, we're in the midst of that with social media. I think as a society, we're still trying to figure out how to evaluate validity of the things that we see online, but also in particular social media. There is a lot of evidence that social media influences people's beliefs. And I'll talk about kind of why in a second, but I mean, regardless of your political party, I mean, I think you have to look back over the last election cycle and everybody can agree that like the proliferation, of conspiracy theories was probably heavily influenced by social media. Now, kids are no different, and they have more difficulty than adults in determining validity and not of the messaging. The problem is, and this has been pretty clearly shown with research, when it comes to social media, negative posts, negative messages, negative response are forwarded 1,000 times more than positive ones. And that's been a pretty consistent finding. The other thing is that the algorithms of social media are designed to feed you what it thinks you want. And so what happens is there's a significant preponderance of negative messages that are fed to kids that by just pure frequency of exposure, they start to actually accept them more and think that they're mainstream, even if they're not. So, you know, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The other thing, too, is that kids, they're very much a part of their social life is caught up in social media, right? They view their online friends as just as valid friendships as their friends in school or their friends in soccer or that sort of thing. And that can be good, but it also can set them up for some negative experiences in terms of like online bullying now is the most common form of bullying. And it's pretty frequent, it's pretty significant. About, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say between 15 and 20% of kids have been the target of online bullying. And to us, we think, oh, well, just turn it off. Well, it's not that big a deal, it's just someone online. But for them, because that's such an important part of their social circle, it can really have a very significant impact on their emotional adjustment, on how they view themselves. And again, if those negative messages about them are being projected and repeated and magnified, it can really have a significant emotional toll. Online bullying is pretty sophisticated nowadays. There are kind of community standards to try to shut it down. They're terribly ineffective. And so, I don't know, you guys have probably heard situations about people starting fake social media accounts about someone and then posting a bunch of stuff, like made up stuff, and then forwarding that to everybody at school. It gets pretty nasty. It's pretty vicious. And because there's an element of anonymity there, the bullies basically there's no consequences. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. The other thing, too, is that there's a pretty clear link between, and this is more in teenagers, there's a pretty clear link between depression and social media use. Now, I don't know if we can 100% say that it's a cause and effect sort of relationship, but there's a relationship there. And we can see where, because messaging influences people's beliefs, then that can lead to depression, or also probably even more likely magnify depression. And we're not sure exactly why. I mean, I think in part it is the negativity that's happening, but also some people think that, okay, well, when people actually post something positive about themselves, it makes their life look glamorous or easy or perfect. And I think kids have a harder time realizing that, well, there's more going on than that, right? And everybody has challenges. But to the kid, it looks like everybody's life is perfect, but then they're getting a lot of negative messages just about things, and they tend to I think there's a chance that they kind of spiral down, if that makes sense. The other thing, too, is that in terms of kind of the physiological response, the neurological response when it comes to social media, we have evidence to indicate that things like short videos and flipping from one kind of engaging content to the next actually gives you a little shot of dopamine in your nucleus accumbens. So your nucleus accumbens is a spot kind of deep down in the middle of your brain, and it's the reward center of your brain. It's the part that gives you that kind of feel good that paid off. And it helps increase the chance that what you did to trigger that, it increases the chance you'll do that again. And so we're starting to suspect that for some kids, if they are maybe prone towards, maybe they have some attention problems, or maybe they don't always have kind of the best self-regulation, that there's a chance that they can become addicted to things that trigger that. And so social media looks like it's one thing. Short videos, like on Reels or YouTube Shorts, seem to trigger that. Did I say video games? I forget. Okay. So video games, I'll mention it again because that's like a big one.
And it's different than watching a movie on Netflix.
Exactly.
It doesn't trigger the same.
Because what happens is, because they can flip from one interesting thing to the next, it basically gets their brain used to always being entertained, always getting that feel-good response. And so when they're not in a situation where they're getting that constant reinforcement, they feel even more bored, and it's even harder for them to stay mentally engaged in whatever kind of non-exciting activity they have to do, which is most of school. So I don't know if we can say that if a kid wasn't predisposed to having attention problems, that use of this would create that. But what we can say is every day when I see kids who have attention problems, a lot of time is spent on electronics use, and they can really get hooked to it. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, I haven't read the book, but I was just told about it, so I can't recommend it because I haven't read it yet. But it's called Dopamine Nation, and it talks a little bit about some of the stuff. But yeah, I think now let's go.
Well, hold on, I've got one more thing.
Okay, go.
So this is a little bit more broad comment. It's not specific just to social media, but we also have pretty good evidence that small screen use, as well as video game playing, if they're used too close to bedtime, actually it disrupts your sleep architecture. So you have different phases of sleep that your brain goes through. There's 5, I can't remember. But it disrupts the sequencing of your brain going through that, and it actually shortens your REM sleep. Your REM sleep is the time where we think that your brain is taking short-term memories and transitioning them to long-term memories. And by shortening that REM sleep, you actually have a negative impact on your long-term learning. And there's been studies that have shown that use of electronics right up until bedtime actually slows vocabulary acquisition over the course of development. So we're not sure why that happens, but I think it's probably because that dopamine hit, it fires the brain up, it excites the brain, and the brain needs time to kind of calm down before you initiate that. It looks like also small screens, so like phones and tablets, the bright LCD light from those also throws off your internal clock. It kind of tricks your brain into thinking it's daytime. And so there's kind of a couple of things going on. Blue screen filters, people thought that would help prevent that, but it hasn't really. So that can have an effect on quality of sleep.
Okay, so we just wanted to talk a little bit about how to manage all that, because managing the technology is a big deal. I think the first thing that we always talk about is privacy, because definitely when we work with parents and they'll say, but I don't want to interrupt their privacy. And it's like, okay, but think about, you would not say to your kid, hey, go over to this stranger's house that I don't know and hang out for 2 hours, right? But when you say online, you're doing that. And so really we say your kids don't have privacy when it comes to technology. You bought it, you own it, you pay for it, it's yours. And you determine how they use it. Even our daughter who had a lockdown Instagram account, private, and she comes to me and she said, do you know this? A couple of my friends had friended her on Instagram. So she's like, Mom, do you know who this is? Somehow a complete stranger, had gotten into her private message and he just started with, hey, how are you? And I was like, this is her mom, you are blocked, never contact her again, But if I hadn't been checking her messages, she brought that to me, but let's say she hadn't, And so you should have access to your kids' phones. You should check them regularly. A few things we say, I know some of you, your kids don't have phones yet. Wait till 8th. If you can't, 8. Yeah, I mean, as long as you can put it off. And then, when we had to give our daughter now they have great smartphones that don't have you can't put social media. Those are great. When Hallie was in 6th grade, we didn't have that, and she was biking by herself. So we felt like, okay, we've got to get her a smartphone. But we took everything off of it. She's like, this is boring. And we're like, yeah, exactly. It's just to get to school and back. So have a technology plan. Like the minute you start looking at it before they get a phone, even now, if they're just on video games and things like that, and say, what are we going to do? And put it on your fridge. And it could also be with your parents should participate too. So some things on your technology plan would be no phones at the dinner table. Kids, no phones in your rooms at night. And that we have access to your phone. And so make a plan, everybody agree to it, and that gives you something. You guys are actually at the right age to be talking about this.
Well, and if I can interrupt real quick, I think it's important, like talking about these things on the front end is really important, obviously, because as they become teenagers, it gets harder to then suddenly impose this stuff on them if they've already had kind of different expectations leading up to that. So as much as you can kind of start talking about it in advance and setting those expectations and having those conversations, that makes it easier. I'm not going to say easy, but easier down the road. So,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's great. And you want to start that open communication, and that's where a technology plan can come in place. I also have to say this for the moms. Please don't make the moms be the social media police, because a lot of times it defaults, and it really is a team effort. Even if you have an easy kid with it, it still is a team effort. It's a lot of work, and so just definitely get involved in that. If you have girls, I think social media is especially hard on teenage girls, and whatever you can do, from the time they're little on, to pour into them and to make sure that they understand, that they are unique, that God created them unique, that they are beautiful, that they have a purpose. And anything you can say into that, I think is so important. When our daughter was little, James would do a beauty shop with her. I hated to dry her hair. And so he would blow out her hair, and they do beauty shop and talk about all the princesses and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a great time for him to bond with her and to affirm her. And so definitely take that extra time, because when they get on social media, they won't be getting those positive messages. And then there is parent control software. Make sure you know about that. There's Bark, there's Boomerang,
And just a quick plug, Boomerang works really well for Android. Bark works well for Apple, for OS.
Yeah.
Were you going to talk more about that? Or?
Well, I was just going to say you can't totally rely on that, because
there's always a back door. There's always a way around it. But the conversation that I think is helpful is, this isn't to control you. The purpose of this isn't to regulate every single thing you do. It's to help you set your own limits. It's to help you kind of develop some routines and some ways of managing this so that you can be independent in this when you're older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the goal is you're extending the leash a little bit at a time. You don't want to be so locked down that they're 18 and they've never had any sort of social media. I mean, it's what it is, that's their world. And so the goal is not to shut it down until they go to college and then the door is wide open. It's how are you helping them manage it, particularly maybe if they have attention problems or things like that. And okay, you're too much on, you're spending too much on reels. This is addictive. And, just having those conversations about it. And I was going to say something else about that. I forgot.
I think related to that too, having conversations with them about some of the algorithms that happen in social media, and the fact that they're getting something from you every time that you go online. Nothing in life is free. And even though you don't have to pay money, they're getting something from you, and you need to be aware of that. Mm-hmm. Saying they're going to get your data may not mean a whole lot, but they want to find out about you, because the more that they can hook you and keep you engaged, the more money they make. So I think conversations like that, not in a paranoid sort of way, but in a hey, you need to take this into account when you're using this. that can, again, help them start to set limits on,
Yeah.
on their usage.
Yeah, and there's, for example, there's a Facebook group, Bark does Parenting in a Tech World that I'm on, and that's just a great resource. For little kids, there's books like Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I think it's important to start talk about, I think we said, 40%?
40% of 8th graders have seen a naked picture of a classmate.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, so definitely you've got to be talking about it. It's rough. I feel like we are doomsday here, and we're not meaning to be, but.
No, I am.
Okay, he's
actually,
not.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have like 2 or 3 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
That's an excellent point, like modeling good limits, yeah. Yep. Yeah. But time-wise, honestly, is the biggest one, right? And I think modeling good limits is crucial, right? And so, setting down the phone at dinner and taking time to engage and not going kind of right into work or right into on our phone or something. I mean, that's
Yeah, I think it's a struggle for
huge.
everybody. I mean, I put screen time on my phone. You know what I mean? And I also put filters on my phone too, because sometimes the kids will grab my phone. So, I think all that we have to restrict ourselves and model that. So,
But I think that's part of kind of something that when you're developing your family technology plan, which is like, defines expectations, defines limits that everybody agrees to, that's something that you can incorporate into that, where these aren't just rules for you. Like, this is a plan for the whole family that we're all going to try to follow.
yeah, I would encourage that. When you do the technology plan, make yourself a part of it, where we say, okay, all our phones go here at 10 o'clock, or whatever your plan is, or, no phones at dinner, those things. And those are things that you hold yourself to. And I know our kids, we were sitting at dinner and somebody's looking at phone, they're like, phone needs to be gone. Yeah. And we're like, oh yeah, you're right. So I think that's really important. I definitely, I love information, and I can go down an information hole on the phone. It's like, oh, let me learn about this and that and that. And that's, our daughter loves cooking reels. She's actually a very good cook. Way too much time on social media learning how to cook.
Well, but it's also like lots of videos about practical jokes and, oh, this cheeseburger tastes terrible, blah. I mean, total nonsensical stuff, like hours.
Yeah.
So it's.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're learning alongside you all, but I think that it's just realizing we have to engage. Like, we don't have a choice. And I think it's easier to say, oh, I can't learn it. It's too much. I can't. And it's constantly changing. You think you get one thing, and, like, I surprised my daughter the other day because I said something about Be Real, and she's like, you know about Be Real? I was like, yeah, it's my job to know about Be Real, And so staying ahead of it is kind of a full-time job, but we have to. To help them, to engage with them. And, and that last thing I would say is, also don't think of it as a completely like they're over here and I have to manage it. Like, engage with them in it. If they're going to sit and watch a funny video, sit and watch it with them. And that way you can have, we have a friend who he and his daughter make TikTok videos together, like funny videos. Okay, that's a way for them to connect and him to be involved in the situation. Although I don't recommend TikTok on any level. So we don't do TikTok, but just that idea. So. Well, thank you all.